Thank you very much once again. I'll try to be as crisp and as quickly as possible so that we can give more time to questions. So my name is Antony Karembu. I believe Linda has already introduced me in the initial session. So I'll just go to the first slide where part of this discussion will be for you to understand the bank group, more so how we structured and the kind of instruments that we have deployed, not specifically to East Africa, but across the African continent. So that's the first slide. So as you know, the bank was established in 1964, but again, over the years, we've managed to, the latest member to the bank was South Sudan, that makes it 54. And it's divided into two. So you have the ADF fund, which looks at, I would say, low-income countries, and more so countries that cannot be classified as middle income. So they will be able to borrow from this window because this window ADF fund, that's the African Development Fund, is mostly financed by 27 state participants, but a lot of that is also for regional donors. Then we have the Nigerian Trust Fund, which also looks at providing project preparation for most projects across Africa. So with regards to the energy complex, one interesting thing about African Development Bank is the fact that it's a one-stop shop where we have colleagues who can sit, I'll say, not on the fence, but both sides. You can still do public sector projects and private sector projects. So this energy complex is structured into 4 departments. So the first department being power systems. This looks typically at technical expertise and concentrates on power utilities and also grid-based power systems. Then you have the renewable energy division where I sit, which cuts across all these other departments because we only concentrate on renewable energy. But we also have windows where we finance energy efficiency projects and clean cooking solutions. Then we have the climate change and green growth. This is the department that actually gives us an access to the climate investment funds. That is like SREP, that's a scaling renewable energy program, or the GCF. Then lastly, this is the Department on Financial Solutions and Policy and Regulation, cuts across the private sector and works hand in hand with the regulatory and policy aspects because, as you all know, one of the bottlenecks of private sector is regulatory systems that do not align to their appetite. So in a nutshell, that's the selected AFDB financial instruments. Like I'd mentioned, AFDB cuts across. It's a holistic approach where we look at from private sector all the way to policy, all the way to knowledge products, all the way to credit enhancement. So on the first window here, you'll see lending instruments, the typical senior debt that we provide for private sector transactions, but also on the lending instruments, we also provide loans to governments with particular transmission lines, and more in specific, certain transmission lines that we've also provided in the region, more specifically the Ethiopian-Kenya connector. Then again, in the lending instruments, we have trust funds within the bank that will be used to provide a blended or grant financing or concessional financing to senior debt, so that at least going forward, the project has it's able to reach financial close. Now, the interesting thing about the bank is that we're cognizant that projects don't just come about. We have to put some money into feasibility studies. But if you're going to put money into feasibility studies, then you must have an appetite from the off-taker. Now here, AFDB has certain project preparation funds, And here we're talking about SEFA green baseload that's look specifically at big utility scale projects, but also they look at IPP procurement programs that will assist or bring in IPPs to ensure that there's a balance within the system, that at least the private sector is given the platform that it deserves. But not forgetting capacity building, because at both ends, what we've seen across, I'll say, the continent is that we have governments going into contract negotiations or PPAs, and then once the project starts commercial operations, you find the government renating back on the PPA that it signed. But it's because at the point of the PPA negotiations, they did not have ample skills to negotiate some of these terms. Then I'll just move quite fast. On the credit enhancement, again, we provide support to the private sector, and this is where we provide partial risk guarantees to ensure the backstops of obligations. So here I've given an example of the Botswana Power Corporation and NamPower, and this is one big solar project or initiative that we are involved in South Africa. Then we have collaborative platforms where it's a marketplace, everybody comes in, and there's deal structuring. There's also peer, I'll say, peer-to-peer interactions. And here we have two interesting platforms. That's the Africa Energy Marketplace, which is specifically only for governments. But the Africa Investment Forum, it cuts across because it's for origination and structuring and closure of high-profile projects. Now, I will just move straight to the fund. And this fund is called the Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa, because we're cognizant that project preparation is quite a challenge when you want to seek financing to pack up a project from a technical, financial, and economical view, and also E&S, to ensure that it will be able to fetch funding downstream. So the Sustainable Energy Fund just got converted into a special fund in October. It has operated for 5 years as a trust fund. Now, the difference between the special fund and a trust fund is the fact that now, as a special fund, it can go directly from providing financing for project preparation, but it can also provide financing for blending senior debt. So it's structured into three. You have the green mini grids. Of course, this will say are the low-hanging fruits, but more so the off-grid sector, which not too much emphasis is put into it, because at the end of the day, we always have to balance. Why should the rural person pay more than the person who's grid connected? So here, SEFA is able to provide grant funding to ensure that these mini grids are financially viable. Then we have the green baseload, the one I've just spoken about, and this also targets large-scale renewable energy. And here we talk about geothermal, concentrated solar power, and large-scale utility solar, which are connected to battery storage. And then, of course, energy efficiency. So I'll just move ahead so that we can be efficient on time. And then I'll go to the Green Minigrid Market Development Program. I think this is one of the success stories of SEFA, because as we moved into mini-grids, we found that mini-grid practitioners and also policymakers did not have ample skills or a one-stop shop where they can learn how to develop this project from the ground going up. So it's structured into three. That's a developer and policy maker help desk. This is just a help desk. You can call in if you have a project. They will look at it and advise you. Then we have market intelligence, where we do publications and we go around the respective countries to understand the off-grid sector, because as much as we all pushing the grid or the grid connected, a lot of the time off-grid is normally forgotten, or it is not prioritized by the respective governments within the energy planning cycle. Then, of course, quality assurance to ensure that at the point the grid is connected the mini grid is connected to the grid, then we don't have issues of load variance or frequency issues. Then this is just a snapshot of the Green Mini Grid Help Desk. The email address or the website is there. So as you can see, it's a website you can access. If you're a developer, it has a side of the developer. If you're a policymaker, it has a side of the policymaker. But it also, more importantly, has publications that you can look into, at least for respective countries, to understand before you go into a country, how is the lay of the land. Then as we're moving ahead, we realize that the bank can actually use a debt financing platform that are anchored within the bank, but not managed by the bank. So this is one called the Facility for Energy Inclusion. And what you realize is that if a project is below 10 megawatts, literally even the financial institutions will not have appetite for that. So this was the motivation to have this, I'll say, energy fund or trust fund that is managed outside the bank, and it looks at any projects that are below the 10 megawatt threshold. Some of the projects that have benefited from this Facility for Energy Inclusion include B-Box Rwanda. We also have the Sun Culture in Kenya, and Delight, which is a multinational across 4 countries. Then if you come to the bank, what will be the criteria that you would you'll qualify for non-sovereign? So when you say non-sovereign, this is just a private sector private sector project. So of course, the company has to be incorporated in Africa. The enterprise or the project must be majority owned, so by the private sector investors. Then at least the AFDB, because of quite strict on the environmental guidelines, then it has to ensure it has to conform not only to AFDB, but also the respective countries' environmental standards. But then the others are just standard, which is, of course, we also need to see the developmental impact of this project vis-a-vis the country's strategic priorities. Then we have an interesting electricity regulatory framework. Like I mentioned, AFDB, it's a one-stop shop where we look at the energy sector holistically. Now, the ERI, the Electricity Regulatory Framework, it was started in 2018 just to have a peer-to-peer kind of conversation around regulators, and so that they can learn from each other, because it was seen that there were definitely gaps in electricity sector regulations. And we needed to see, out of the respective African regulators, who is doing well and what can be learned from any of them. So it is made up of 3 pillars. The first pillar is the Regulatory Governance Index, which looks definitely at how the framework supports the electricity sector. Then the second one is the Regulatory Substance Index, which assesses the regulatory framework, and based on the regulatory framework, then it's implemented in practice. Because what we have seen is that we have frameworks or policies that are there, but they're not implementable. I guess maybe how they were drafted, or they were not realistic at that point, or times have overtaken them. Then we have the Regulatory Outcome Index, which assesses the outcomes of the regulatory processes, but more specifically, insights on how the actions of the regulators have affected the sectors, the respective sectors. Then again, we have an energy portal if you want to have information across respective countries in Africa, be it transmission, access to electricity, potential for renewable energy generation. Then we have the Africa Energy Portal, that is a one-stop shop that reflects across all the respective countries, but also provides further information as to the list of project developers in the continent, but more specifically, what projects are going on and what kind of projects have been closed as we moved on. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.